field where the crops are their main source of livelihood, or it's a dramatic decline in the incidence of malaria, which is often the number one source of illness and even death in these communities. And then we've seen that in the space of 1 to 2 years, you can have dramatic increases in basic services like school meals, clinics, education, and so forth, and indeed the introduction of clean drinking water in a sustainable manner. So that has been a major lesson of the Millennium Villages project, just how much can be achieved through local teams with a little bit of empowerment to use some very basic tools to really achieve dramatic breakthroughs at a considerable scale of literally hundreds of thousands of people just through an initial small effort. Now, what we're seeing now in the Villages project is that there's a real effort that we're working with the communities on to move to a sustainable delivery of services and sustainable growth in income generation. So on the services, on the public services, we're working very closely with the local governments to think through how can years 6 through 10 best proceed as phase 2 of the project, building on the success of years 1 through 5 and phase 1, in which we're at the midpoint right now. So we'll be moving to phase 2 in 2011, and there's a lot of work to be done to actually figure out how best to continue to support the local team to provide the best available services, and also to ensure that the healthcare, the education, the infrastructure, and so forth is made available on an ongoing basis. And similarly, working with the international official donor community of the rich country governments to make sure that they fulfill their promises, on which they're far behind, to actually provide the resources that are necessary to continue to implement these basic interventions. One of the core propositions of the project is that we provide roughly $60 per capita, per person, per year in these Millennium Villages. And that is a very small amount of money, considering that pays for agriculture, health, education, infrastructure, and so forth. It's a significant amount of money when one considers how poor these communities are and that they don't even have that $60 per person per year to make these basic investments. But at the same time, it's less than, significantly less than, what the international community has promised to make available to these same communities to help them achieve the Millennium Development Goals. And in 2005, the leaders of the G8, for example, promised to make available at least $85 per person per year by 2010. So we're showing how those promises can be used and indeed must be used in order to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. And we're also able to experience the very basic reality, which is that in the absence of those promises being fulfilled and the resources, very simple and basic resources being made available, these communities cannot achieve the Millennium Development Goals. No matter how hard they keep working, no matter how much they sow their fields and crops, and no matter how much weeding they do, if they don't have the basic fertilizer, the modern seeds, the bed nets, they're going to be stuck in that low agricultural productivity, which Japan was able to get itself out of about 100 years ago through very concerted efforts and investments in agricultural productivity and irrigation and water management. And they're still waiting for that first big boost in agricultural productivity, and also in the disease control and the other forms of social investment in infrastructure. Now, I'll share a final point on the business side. One of the major priorities we're focusing on now is the transition, supporting the transition to diversified income sources, business development, higher value-added crops and services, so that as the communities have their surplus, and now 3 years in a row, in most cases, reliable surplus of the basic staple food like maize or rice or millet or even cassava, that they can actually then diversify into fruits or vegetables or other cash crops that can be sold at higher prices, or even sunflower seeds that can actually get something in the market and even in a best case be exported. So we're working with a lot of investors and local teams to identify how businesses can be developed to take advantage of that newfound food security, that newfound surplus, to make investments into higher value-added businesses that can then continue to increase the incomes for the family and get them on that first and long-term step of the transition to self-sustaining economic growth. There are many technical issues within